Welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by area realtor Jim York and York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information about the local real estate market, featuring leading experts in the real estate field.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. I'm Michael York with the York Real Estate Group, and I'm joined today by our host Jim York and his guest Don Ross of Ross Title and Escrow.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Well, Don, thanks for coming again today.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be back.
I look forward to this every month.
Oh, sure you do.
So, Don, for our viewers that haven't seen us before, give them a little background about yourself.
I'm an attorney in the state of Florida, member of the bar since 1983, partner in Ross Lanier and Dyfic. I own Ross Title and Escrow. I'm a shareholder in Downing Fry Realty. Been the attorney there for 25 or so years. My office is the corner of 6th Avenue North and 41. We've got approximately 8 people working on the closing process, not including me, and have been doing it for quite some time.
For about 30 years?
All my life.
All your life.
Seems like it.
And Don, you have an experienced team down there, so what I'd like to do is we have one of your employees that's employee of the month. Could we just bring her up into the screen and maybe you could
Sure.
talk about her a
Sure.
little bit? Because she is one of your key employees.
Well,
right?
my absolute, there she is. Oh, that's her yelling at me. That's Janet Nickerson. She does not like her picture being taken. She's worked with me for 28 years. I've been married for 36 years, so that just shows you the term of the relationship. Her daughter works for me, her sister works for me, her niece works for me. Good Detroit work ethics, very bright lady. Should have gone to law school, actually, and just an extremely nice person.
Well, that's good. I know she's done a tremendous job for our team here.
Thank you.
Don, today we're going to talk about people purchasing in a new community.
Okay.
And the key points that I'd like to make is when they first go in, I think it's important that they obviously pick a realtor to go in there with them. Maybe you could highlight a little points on that. And then the second thing, reading the documents and picking someone like yourself to do the closing as their closing agent versus the developer's closing agent.
Okay.
So maybe let's just touch base on, we start with a client or they should,
Well,
where should they start?
they should have a realtor. There's it's listed property. The seller's going to pay a commission anyways. So not to have somebody at no cost to yourself to represent you, somebody with hopefully experience in that community is I can't imagine why they wouldn't want free help from an experienced person who's loyal, strictly to them. And looking at your entire family, I mean, we know Michael specializes in golf courses.
That's right.
You're looking at a golf course community. Of course you want somebody who's experienced in dealing with new development golf course communities, who plays the courses, which I know he does, and knows the contracts, and has, like any successful realtor, a team that he can draw on at any time. So I really, not to have one to walk in there and just register, you're being stared by the developer's agent, is not prudent, would be a fair way of putting it.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that when they go in and fill out that registration, they should say they're working with a realtor or put the realtor's name down so they can let the developer they are working with a realtor.
Well, it's one of those, like, why wouldn't you?
That's right.
I mean, is there an argument against it?
Right.
Are there 4,000 reasons why it might actually benefit you? Absolutely. And you're dealing with communities that the homes could be millions of dollars, and you're not going to get somebody who's experienced. And people are coming from other states, and they're used to the way it's done in New York or Connecticut or Illinois, and they're not going to get somebody who works for them.
That's right.
At no charge.
At no charge. Right.
I don't.
It's a no-brainer.
You wonder how they got their money if they don't do that. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, no offense, but I just can't imagine why not.
Okay, well, next thing is you brought some contracts and documents from some development that you represented, and I just wanted our viewers to see how big a file there is on something like this.
Well, this is actually a small file, and just to let our viewers know how hard well, I probably shouldn't say that. The email I got from you and what the show is going to be about.
Right.
But this is once we actually have a contract. I have many transactions where I'm looking at documents or talking to people, negotiating the developer contracts before they actually sign anything. And many of them might result in nothing being signed. And there's a certain art to getting the critical changes made that you want, depending upon your situation, to the developer contract. I mean, I was talking to a gentleman this morning who lends money to developments all over the country. I mean, a very wealthy person. He's based in Pennsylvania, and he's asking me, do they have confessed judgments in Florida, Don? I says, no, sorry, no. And that's one where you don't actually have to serve the person. They just admit that they're responsible in the contract. And then he was asking about his financing arrangement with the developer, and I'm trying to explain the changes in the federal law. So I will spend a fair amount of time, because they either to contact the agent first,
That's right.
and then the agent sends them my way, and we get them to a comfort level. We get them to focus on the most important aspects of the developer contract. Psychologically, if there are 6 points, but 2 of them are really, really important, and the other 4 are not so important,
Right.
sometimes you have to focus on the 2 or 3 things that you think you might get the developer to agree to. And typically, you do an addendum to the contract, or an amendment, as the case might be, because they break out into a cold sweat if you actually start crossing things out in a developer
right.
contract.
Yeah,
God
they do.
forbid you do that. So we do amendments and addendums of which one will fly, which one is important, which ones are not so important. And I can add the color, or the realtor can add the color on how reliable that developer is, that their walkthrough means something. They actually do follow through and do the things listed on the walkthrough statement. The amount of people that we've run into, you and I both, who repurchase in that development, just because they have a reputation, it means something to them, so that's very reassuring to the client. So that's when you have your team and they're experienced in that particular community, and they know people by name, and they can actually refer them to people who purchased there. You can take something that's, I mean, my developer contract in here is 40-something pages.
Right.
You could take an intimidating 40-page document and reduce it to something that is not quite so intimidating.
Right. Don, before we get into those contracts and in the documents, we're going to take a little short break, and
Okay.
we're going to be back in 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
When picking a realtor, don't just pick anyone. Pick someone with experience. Pick someone with a proven track record. Pick a realtor like Jim York from Downing Fry Realty, the #1 brokerage with the most real estate transactions in the area.
My husband and I had very specific ideas about what we wanted in our new home. Jim York was able to help us find the home that was ideal for us.
With over 20 years of real estate experience in Southwest Florida, Jim York has negotiated over $200 million in sales contracts. Selecting the right realtor is a critical decision that can earn you thousands when selling or save you thousands when buying.
Jim also helped us with a mortgage lender and a good real estate attorney. He went that extra mile, and his experience says it all.
Call Jim York for a no-obligation meeting at 239-273-6727 or visit his website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. Don, let's continue this conversation. Let's go into that small little 40-page contract you have there. And
It's 42 pages,
42
actually,
pages,
and that's
and-
without the exhibits. And the purchaser in this case is a dentist from another area. And I've done closings with this doctor before, so he had this emailed to me, and I was able to go through it, tell him what he had a chance of changing, what he didn't have a chance of changing, my input on the developer itself, is it reputable? because he really didn't
Right.
You know, a lot of questioning on the remedies clause. You know, if he fails to close, what does he lose? A lot of questions on the inspection provisions, and in this one, like you've mentioned in a number of seminars we've had together, they actually do allow the buyer to go in and do an inspection, and they're not necessarily bound by it, but they let you do it. If you want to do your radon or your mold, you can do it. You know, the warranty provisions, and if it's a home being built, I spend a lot of time going over the specifications of what exactly is being built. I mean, every once in a while I get someone who brings in our Naples Board of Realtors form, and they try to crowbar into that form something that's being modified with like $500,000 worth of reconstruction. And I try to make the point that you should be able to read this thing and know what's being built.
That's right.
I mean, so if you're going to go to a court, if you're not happy with the results of what they do, you know, a third party, a judge, can look at it and say, oh, you're supposed to have crown molding of this size, baseboards of this height,
Right.
you know, tray ceilings, you know, 2 coats of paint, landscape plan, you know, is there a community plant in the front yard? It's got to be clear so that an average human being can read it and say, that's what we're buying, and when they walk in, it's not there, why isn't it there? Versus what I see quite frequently, they have no idea. You know, they're just relying on the oral statements of a developer who's just trying to get rid of it.
That's right. Yeah.
But they don't want to hire a lawyer to prepare a construction sale agreement. They're trying to use an already built agreement. But this is the typical developer contract. They'll get into, you know, title companies. They'll get into loans. If the house isn't built yet, a lot of the financing contingencies really aren't worth a whole heck of a lot because you're not going to be able to lock in a rate.
So, yeah, 60 days before.
Yeah,
so.
it takes you quite some time. They'll give teaser credits to the buyer if you use their lender and their title company. And I've heard from other realtors, one who's sitting 15 feet from us as we speak, who will remain nameless. Hi. That, you know, and I hear this time and time again, it's not just this lady. If you use, in some cases, if you use their lender and their title company, they work for the developer. They don't work for you.
That's right.
And getting a return phone call is more problematic, and I'm generalizing, so and they're not all that way. Getting the lender to care, I guess, and maybe that's the wrong word, but the lender doesn't have to worry about, you know, Jim York sending more business to that particular lender.
That's right.
Because the developer is going to send all the business.
Exactly. Right.
Even if they do a lousy job.
Right.
They don't care.
They don't care.
It doesn't affect their sale. It affects the customer satisfaction, but then they don't care. So I try to get my clients to look at whatever the teaser rate is. With title insurance, we usually match it anyways, and they have a you know, attorney / title company who represents just them. And with a lender, I recommend they get a lender's estimate. You can take that and go to, you know, Kevin or whoever your favorite person is, and say, can you beat this? Because they do work on commission basis. The origination fee might be different. The interest rate could be a quarter point different. And if you're going to own the place for a long period of time, that could far exceed any credit they're going to get.
Right.
And just make it a much less stressful transaction. But if they're only going to hold it for a year, well, the credit might make sense. So those are some of the areas with developer contracts. But a lot of it is just educating the out-of-state consumer who's overwhelmed with 42 pages of legal gobbledygook, really.
I think the big important thing is that besides having you, it's the communication that you have with your office and with the realtor, and you know, having an attorney and a closing person on staff that they can pick up the phone and not go, you know, dial number 1 and get a voicemail, or dial number 2 and get.
I hate that.
I hate that. So, which doesn't happen in your office. You know, you have direct lines right to your closing people if they will answer the phone or get right back to you. So I think that's been our biggest frustration, working with clients that work with developers, with their lenders, or title companies, that it's just a communication that's very frustrating. They're up north, we're trying to help them, and you know, we're a third party, and it's just not that easy.
I think more and more it's getting worse, honestly. I think there's less consideration, thoughtfulness, empathy for the consumer. You know, we have somebody come in, and I always remind my staff that this might be the second, third home they've ever done in their entire life.
That's true, isn't it true?
And to them, it's huge. It's a huge commitment for many of them, and they're just frightened.
Right.
So whatever we can do to keep that in mind, to reassure them, to explain what you and I might think is basic,
Right.
and I have to keep reminding myself they don't do this every day like you and I do. So I go over the most rudimentary things, and it's amazing how often it's a novel concept to the buyer or the seller. It's you almost get to a point where you've done this too long, you don't remember what they
Right.
don't know.
That's right.
So it's really we really try to communicate. I remember when I started, I actually read a book on how to run a small law practice, and the number one complaint was not returning telephone calls.
Right. It's still
So-
that way.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately.
Don, we're going to continue this conversation in a little minute here. Before that, we're going to take another little short break, and we'll be right back with Don Ross.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group associated with the #1 brokerage in Naples, Downing Fry Realty, which produced $1.9 billion in sales in 2014, controlling 43% of all transactions in Naples. Jim, Michael, and Morgan York make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. With over $250 million in sales transactions, they can offer you the expertise and trust you want and need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. Don, we kind of went over a little bit on the contract a little bit, the 42 pages, but the point that I wanted to make too before we took our break was that you know, a person buys, like you said, a home 2 or 3 times or 4 times in their lifetime.
Right, entire life.
They probably are buying a resale home. They're really not buying a new construction
Right.
home. So when they do come down here from up north, or even if they're here in Naples, to get a 42-page contract and the condo docs can be overwhelming, because it is written by attorneys, and you know, they have their own kind of language. It's not really
I beg
English.
your pardon.
Right. So I just wanted to emphasize that on the show, that it's so important that you have people, that surround yourself with good people. Not saying the developers aren't, but it is one-sided. And you know, sometimes I look at these things with dealing for 20 years doing business here, that, and kind of maybe like you, is that, you know, the contracts are the contracts, and you know, they are boilerplate, but there are a lot of things that you really want to look into those contracts, because, you know, let's say we go to the condo docs or the homeowners, they might not be able to have a truck, or a lot of people have dogs anymore, and you know, there could be weight limitations on dogs. So let's just maybe touch base on the condo docs, that some highlights you think people should be looking for.
This is actually an unusually slim set of condominium documents, which tells me, without even looking at it, they're old.
Right.
And actually, I did look at it before the show started. 1975.
Right.
So what happens a lot, and because of how many I do, I think I pick it up more
Quicker, yeah, right.
than somebody else might in the same situation. If it's old, it's been restated, there's a new set somewhere, almost always. If it's old and it hasn't been restated, which means they redo the whole thing, there's 4,000 amendments. There's got to be. And when you have 4,000 amendments, it is really hard to fit those 4,000 amendments into the main body of the declaration, the bylaws, the articles of incorporation. So, you know, it's my job, and I go through and I actually tab pages and I highlight pages, and because I read so many of these things, I see the trends. Like probably one of the biggest trends with condominium documents now is when they regulate guests. You know, they'll do family, non-family.
Right.
Okay, because they assume, this is just my personal theory, I think, that if it's non-family and you say they're a guest, you're lying. I mean,
Right.
you're trying to get around the rental restrictions,
That's right, yeah.
which might be a minimum of 30 days or a minimum of 90 days, no more than 3 times a year. So I will go through, I'll go right to the table of contents in the declaration and get the use restrictions and go through that. And how many, what kind of animals can you have, the lease periods, what is the policy on guests, what kind of vehicle. If it goes over 5 miles per hour, they want it to be licensed. They don't want golf carts. They don't want motorcycles. They don't want boats, in a parking slot. So I'll walk the client through those. And then I'll tell them, you need to read the rules and regs and the frequently asked questions. The rules and regs get into the day-to-day use of the property, the restrictions on your day-to-day use of the property. They might have specific rules on the pool, specific rules on the health, the gym, walking your dog, all sorts of things like that. And then we get into the year-end financial statement, which assets, liabilities. It's entirely different than the balance sheet, which is income and expenses, but the statute calls for the year-end financial. And after going through the recession a number of years ago, go right to the reserves. How much is there?
Right.
I almost always get the question, is that enough, Don? And I'm like, well, it's, like in real life, if you own your home, you generally don't replace the roof, paint the house, pave the driveway all in the same year. You stagger
That's
things.
right, yep.
So, depending upon the number, I'll say it's probably adequate for, what will happen in real life, as long as they don't lose the lottery and have everything hit at once. It is supposed to be based on an actual estimate of what it would cost to replace the roof or paint the building or repave the parking lot. Ironically, some of these, when you get up to the multi-million-dollar condos, the reserves might drop a bit because these are very wealthy people. They don't want somebody else holding their money, and they're not worried about paying a special assessment when the time comes to repair the roof.
Right.
So we go through all that. And then I'll get into, which is somewhere in here, the inspection reports. And I had one for the Carlisle a couple of weeks ago. The buyer was an attorney from Chicago. And I noticed the air conditioning unit was 24 years old. And I said, I forget what his first name was, but Bill or Jim, your air conditioner is 24 years old. And he asked me, he said, Don, are you telling me that because it's defective under the contract, or are you giving me a heads up? I said, I'm giving you a heads up. This is a $3 million condo.
Right.
It's 24 years old. It says right on the inspection report, useful life, 8 to 12 years.
Right.
Takes 24 hours for mold to start to grow. And this is in a very expensive unit. So, of course, when his wife came down to sign the closing statement, I remember her telling me, well, now I have to go shop for an air conditioning unit. It's good, because he's, again, people from up north.
Right.
I grew up north. I wasn't used to the concept of mold. We didn't have that as an issue growing up in New England, and I'm sure he doesn't run into it in the frigid tundra of Chicago. I love Chicago, but it gets quite cold up there. So part of what we do is educate them on the transition from cold climate, warm climate, why the air conditioner is important, whether you want UVA lights or electronic air filters or things like that. Share some common experiences and just make the experience, manage the mood, I guess, lower the anxiety level caused by this 42-page document, then the lengthy condominium documents, then this The inspection reports with the mold reports where everything's in Latin, they tend to get a little nervous considering they might do 2 or 3 deals in their entire life. So that's sort of a very broad oversimplification of part of what I do. And again, that doesn't include the pre-contract stuff. There's a lot of that goes on.
Well, Dan, I thank you for coming on the show today, and I'm sure this is going to help our viewers and maybe other realtors in the area, maybe even some developers. So
Hope it helps somebody.
And I'll look forward to seeing you again next month, okay?
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.